Based on Donald Trump's taxes, it appears that Donald Trump in 10 of 15 years paid no taxes due to business losses. It also appears he only paid $750 in taxes in 1 year. There is nothing wrong with the businessman deducting losses. Let's start from this. If you run a business, you deduct losses. If it impacts your personal taxes because of the way your corporation or your company is set up, well, then you get the benefit of those losses. There's nothing wrong or crooked with it. And to the extent that people are saying there is, they lack an understanding of the tax system. And in fact, a lot of the people who are criticizing the president are people who themselves have taken advantage of the system. There's nothing wrong with taking advantage of the system, and there's nothing patriotic about paying your taxes. I mean, if that was the case, then you would have a bunch of Hollywood billionaires, millionaires writing massive checks to the federal government to rub in our noses that they're more patriotic than us because they paid more in taxes. You can always voluntarily pay more taxes, but most of these progressives want the tax rate raised so that they're forced to pay it as opposed to voluntarily handing it over. And why would you voluntarily hand over your money to the government? So I largely think the bigger story is, where did the Times get the documents from? I actually don't think that the president taking losses as big a story as some people would have. There's a lot of it about rubbing the president's nose in the story because the president has tried to avoid it. We don't know the legitimacy of the documents, though I assume the New York Times would not actually trot out a bunch of fake documents. The president's lawyer quibbled with details and ultimately just quibbled with the bottom line as the story developed. But let me address one of the concerns that actually has a lot of people on the left enraged, and I understand the concern from some people. It does appear that the president is not as wealthy as he claimed to be and sustained a lot of losses. Now, a tax return, this is really important for everyone to understand. A tax return does not necessarily show your wealth. It shows what happened in a particular year. Now, for 10 of the last 15 years, it appears the president, or up to 2016, it appears the president was losing money year over year through his businesses and personal life. But we don't know what his background investments are. So what I mean is, if I have $1 million in the bank, if I have $1 million in the bank and it generates 10% interest, not that it does, but I'm dumb when it comes to math, so I got to make it easy on myself. You generate $1 million, you got $1 million in the bank, and it generates 10% interest. So in a year, it generates $100,000. Your income that year is $100,000. It's not the $1 million you have sitting in the bank. It's the $100,000. So you can call yourself a millionaire, but people would look at your taxes and say, you're not a millionaire. You only made $100,000 last year. And then you get to do all sorts of credits. And by the way, that $100,000, because it's investment income, gets taxed at the capital gains rate, not at the income tax rate. I think that's right. It's an investment dividend. Maybe not. Maybe I can't remember now. Let's just say it's at the income tax rate. Okay, so you're paying taxes on $100,000 was your income, even though you got $1 million in the bank. You get your deductions, and so your adjusted gross income will be something less than $100,000, and you'll pay taxes on that. So we don't know what Donald Trump has in reserves. We don't know what Donald Trump has in the bank. We don't know about a lot of this stuff. What we know is that based on the president's income and his investments in businesses, he lost a lot of money. We don't know how much he has sitting in reserve that he can live off of. He can, if I've got this $1 million, and understand this, if I've got this $1 million sitting in a bank somewhere that's generating interest income for me of $100,000 a year, and I actually tap into the principal, that $1 million, well, it's going to generate, if I spend it, it's going to generate less annual income for me, but I don't have to pay taxes on that $1 million that I've got parked in the bank. I've already paid taxes on it and built up that supply and put it in the bank. Pulling it out doesn't mean I pay taxes on it because taxes have already been paid in most cases. So we don't know any of that information. And a lot of people are just looking at the income tax and they're saying, well, look, I mean, clearly the man made no money. Well, okay, so on his tax returns, that's true. But did he have reserves that he could withdraw from? It appears to be the case. There is a concern, it is a legitimate concern, that if the president is that bad of a businessman, as his taxes seem to say he is, at least that's how people are viewing it, could he be using the presidency to shake down others and make money? Maybe he is. I mean, we do have Trump Hotel in Washington. A lot of conservatives do it. I'm not sure why people are concerned about that, because it's conservatives choosing to stay at the Trump Hotel to support the president. I do get the legitimacy of the concern. I just don't see anything in the tax returns that show this is what he's doing. We only have tax returns through, I think, 2016, 2017. We do know that he made $427.4 million with The Apprentice through licensing and endorsements. That's a pretty hefty chunk of change. There are all sorts of enterprises and income that the president has made money from. Most of his core enterprise, and this is from the New York Times, from his constellation of golf courses to his conservative Magnet Hotel in Washington, report losing millions, if not tens of millions of dollars year after year. The revenue from The Apprentice and from licensing deals is drying up, and several years ago he sold nearly all the stocks that might have helped him plug holes in his struggling properties. The tax audit looms, and within the next 4 years, more than $300 million in loans, obligations for which he's personally responsible, will come due. If that is the case, well, first of all, I would suspect that they would probably be able to restructure those loans if he wins re-election, to restructure them to get out past 2024. But I get the concerns. I just think at this point they are hypothetical concerns. And also, I do think we should acknowledge that there's a whole lot of this on both sides of the aisle happening. How did Harry Reid, who was a boxer from Spotlight or whatever, Nevada, become a multimillionaire with a house at the Ritz as a public servant? There's a lot of this. I don't want to engage in the whataboutism, but I do think that if you hate the president, you're going to put it in the worst possible light. If you love the president, you're going to put it in the best possible light. And the truth is somewhere in the middle on this particular issue. He has lots of businesses that are losing lots of money. Ironically, it appears if you take the New York Times at their word, he hasn't been able to trade on the presidency to boost the profitability of his companies. I mean, here's the thing. It says that the Trump Hotel is losing money in Washington. Again, I mean, there is no evidence that the president is trading on this. I understand there would be a temptation if you're going down the hole financially, but we don't actually have evidence that this is happening. We don't actually have evidence that the president is in the pocket of the Russians, as so many people for so many years have claimed. There's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that the president is getting money. And by the way, if the president were getting sweetheart deals and kickbacks under the table, it wouldn't appear in his income tax returns anyway, and it would raise all sorts of red flags if it flowed into the bottom line unaccounted for, and we can't find it in there. So yes, I get people's concerns. I do. I don't want to be dismissive of the concerns, but I do think that a lot of the concerns come with a hyperpartisan lens from people who just don't like the president and can't acknowledge that the there that they think is there isn't actually there. And that this is a common pattern among business people to deduct losses and to personally take responsibility for losses to be able to offset the losses, to benefit themselves in other ways. I'm not a tax lawyer. I believe we should have a flat tax and we should have super simplified taxes. I think there are too many opportunities in the tax code for people who have enough money to hire enough lawyers to be able to navigate themselves through a financial advantage. If you want to understand the wealth gap in this country, the reason the rich keep getting richer, outpacing everyone else, has a lot to do with the tax code. It has a lot to do with their ability to hire lobbyists to carve out special interests from themselves in Washington, D.C., and it appears Donald Trump took advantage of that system. It is a system that all the politicians rail against on both sides, but all of them fiscally benefit from left, right, and center, and they don't actually fix. And that is the problem. To the extent that there is a problem here, please focus on that one. The tax code in this country is screwed up. The tax code in this country is designed to benefit at this point a lot of very wealthy people, and they're taking advantage of it. A fairer system is not the so-called fair tax in my mind. A fairer system is a flat tax where everyone pays the same percentage of income, capital gains, and the like, making it a very, very easy system. The thing that I think we need to look at is what are the deductions that are being used and abused by businessmen? And oftentimes it's they invest, and this is a business strategy. They invest in losing businesses to take the loss, to offset other taxes. It appears the president may have done that. This situation is not nearly as cut and dry as people on both sides want. I do have questions, though, about where the New York Times got the tax returns. They should not have this information. Someone fed them this information. Was it someone at the IRS who did it? If so, that person broke the law. But there should be an investigation into how the New York Times obtained these documents. Is it stuff that Michael Cohen sent them? Is it stuff that someone from the Trump organization leaked? That, too, is a relevant story. If we're going to hand-wring over the president's taxes, let's at least acknowledge that someone leaked the man's taxes to the New York Times. And you can say, well, it's a unique case. No, it's never a unique case. If it could happen to him, it could happen to someone else. And none of us should be comfortable with the fact that people, for partisan gain, are leaking someone's taxes.